So iOS 15 is official. Apple just announced it at their latest Worldwide Developer Conference, and here it is. Many, including me, have been predicting tons of new features for this release, like redesigned icons in the style of macOS Big Sur, or a new control center, but Apple apparently had other priorities. That said, there is some cool stuff, like the focus mode, the new notifications, and notification summary, but basically, of everything I predicted, only a couple of things became real. They redesigned the weather app, but they kinda had to, it still looked like an iOS 7 app, and also gave the iPad the app library, but other than that, nothing else. So, this time, I didn't try to predict their moves, instead my new concept goes in a very different direction. Starting from the name, this is iPhoneOS. When Apple announced the separation between the iPhone and the iPad's operating systems, it was because, in theory, they wanted the iPad to become more like a computer. They wanted it to be free from some of the limitations iOS had, and still has. In this case, the changes I made are meant to improve the iPhone user experience. Okay, but first, there are some changes that have nothing to do with that, like the redesigned app icons, which it's not like they would alter usability in any way, but I see no reason why Apple should not have a design that's as consistent as possible across all their products. You may have also noticed something, apart from the giant data number which I'll talk more about later in the video. There are no pages. The entire home screen is laid out on a vertical column of apps and widgets. Windows Phone is back from its grave. Obviously, there are some reasons for this change. First, the widgets. With iOS 14, Apple introduced these new widgets which you can put on the home screen. They are nice aesthetically, but they are massive. Even the smallest widget will occupy 1/6 of a page, with the medium-sized one taking up 1/3, and the biggest one 2/3 of a page. This is the main reason why I don't use them, but with a vertical layout, there wouldn't really be the concept of pages. You just have a stream of apps and widgets that can take up as much space as they want. I made this extra large 4x6 widget. Can you imagine that on iOS 15? It would take up an entire page. Here is still a bit ridiculous, but it's not as bad, I guess. I also made a smaller widget because why not? But obviously that wasn't my only argument. This is the part where I explain why I put a giant useless clock on top of the home screen despite having complained about widgets taking up too much space. The clock in itself doesn't have a functional purpose really, but it forces the icons to start from the middle of the screen. This is important because the top part is the hardest to reach with one end. It requires you to physically readjust your hand position, which is not the end of the world obviously. But why have a problem when you can fix it? Obviously, the clock disappears when you start scrolling. If this sounds familiar, it's because Apple already does something like this in some parts of the interface. In many apps, you may have noticed, there's usually a giant title and a ton of empty space at the top. And this is the reason. They want the content to start from a more reachable part of the display. Obviously, this solution I propose would only work with a vertically oriented home screen, unless you don't mind going back 10 years and only having 4 rows of apps per page. But do you know what's worse than having to stretch your hand a little more than you are comfortable with? Having to stretch your hand even more, introducing the control center. To reach the control center, you have to swipe from the highest part of the screen. That's probably the worst gesture of the entire OS. How could it be fixed? It's pretty simple actually. It should be accessed with the swipe from the bottom part of the screen. And yeah, that's already the gesture for multitasking. But who says that they can't be merged together? And that's exactly what I did. In my concept, they share the same screen. No more weird hand readjustments are required. Which is pretty much the general idea behind this whole redesign. Everything in the US should be doable with only one hand, and nothing that can be interacted with should be in the top part of the screen. Then, what about that search bar up here? According to the me of 5 seconds ago, that's basically blasphemy. Yeah, that's something you can interact with, and it is indeed in the top part of the screen. But you don't actually have to touch it directly. You only need to do a downward swipe from any part of the display, as long as you are at the top of the page, and then you can start searching without ever touching the bar. That search bar is already present in some parts of the US, like the app library, but not in others like Spotlight, which is strange because you already access Spotlight by using that same exact gesture. Yet, it has a different bar. I think iOS should use this type of search bar everywhere whenever possible. Now, do I think any of those changes will ever happen? Maybe the control center one, sure, why not? But I don't think they would want the users to react to all those changes at the same time. In the end, what I'm trying to say with this video is that there are still many possible quality of life upgrades Apple could be working on.